rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Elena returned to her childhood home in the hills outside Graz. The house stood where it always had, a stone and timber structure with dark shutters and a steep roof designed to shed the heavy Austrian snows. But everything else had changed. The garden her mother once tended was overgrown. The windows were dark. And inside, her father sat alone at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. "He's not coming," her father said without looking up. "Your brother made that clear." Elena set down her suitcase. She had driven 5 hours from Vienna, through sheets of rain that made the mountain roads treacherous, because her mother's funeral was tomorrow, and someone had to be there. But Matthias, her older brother, the golden child, the one everyone in the family had always protected, had sent only a text message. "I can't face it. Tell Papa I'm sorry." She wanted to be surprised, but she wasn't. Matthias had a gift for absence when things became difficult. What did surprise her was the anger she saw on her father's face, an emotion he had never directed at his son before. 15 years, Elena said, pulling out a chair. 15 years he's been telling everyone that I'm the difficult one, that I abandoned the family, that I caused Mama's stress and made her sick. Her voice cracked despite her effort to control it. And now he won't even come to her funeral. Her father finally looked at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "There are things you don't know." "Then tell me." But he only shook his head and stood, retreating to his study as he always had when conversations became uncomfortable. Elena was left alone in the kitchen that smelled faintly of her mother's cooking, paprika and caraway, the scent memory of 1,000 Sunday dinners. The funeral was small. Her mother had been ill for 2 years, and in that time, many friends had drifted away, uncomfortable with the reality of cancer, with the slow diminishment of a woman who had once been the center of every gathering. Elena stood at the graveside under a black umbrella, her father beside her, and counted the people who had come. 23. Her mother deserved hundreds. At the reception afterward, held in the community hall attached to the old Baroque church, people approached Elena with careful sympathy. But beneath their kind words, she heard the questions they weren't asking. "Where is Matthias? Why isn't your brother here? Is it true what he said about you?" Because Matthias had told stories. For years, he had constructed a careful narrative in which Elena was the villain of their family saga. She had moved to Vienna at 18, desperate to escape the suffocating expectations of their small community. She had studied literature instead of something practical. She had rejected the traditional path, marriage, children, a house near her parents. And Matthias had used every choice she made as evidence of her selfishness, her coldness, her failure to appreciate their family. When their mother's illness progressed, Matthias had told everyone that Elena refused to help, that she visited rarely, that her absence was breaking their mother's heart. The truth, that Elena had offered repeatedly to take leave from her teaching position to move back and help with care, and that her mother had gently refused, not wanting to disrupt her daughter's life, was never mentioned. The lies had worked. People in their village looked at Elena with pity or judgment, sometimes both. And Matthias had remained the devoted son, the one who stayed close, who everyone assumed was sacrificing so much, except he hadn't been there either. Not really. Elena had discovered this during her mother's final months, when she'd taken emergency leave and spent weeks at her parents' house. Matthias would visit for an hour, bring expensive flowers, hold their mother's hand while posting touching photos to social media, and then leave, always with some urgent excuse. Elena had been the one sitting through the long nights, managing medications, calling doctors, holding the basin when her mother was sick. But Matthias's version was the one everyone believed. At the reception, Elena found herself cornered by her Aunt Greta, her mother's older sister, a severe woman in her 70s who had always favored Matthias. "It's shameful that your brother isn't here," Greta said, her voice pitched just loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. "Whatever disagreements you two have had, family should come first. Your mother always said." "My mother said a lot of things." Elena's voice was sharper than she intended. "But perhaps you should ask Matthias why he's not here, instead of assuming it's somehow my fault." Greta's expression hardened. "Still so defensive. Your mother worried about you constantly, you know. The stress you caused her." Elena felt something inside her crack. Years of swallowed words, of letting Matthias's lies stand unchallenged because challenging them would only create more family conflict, suddenly became unbearable. "Did she?" Elena said quietly. "Or is that what Matthias told you she felt?" Before Greta could respond, Elena's father appeared at her elbow. "Elena, come with me," he said. "There's something you need to see." He led her outside into the gray afternoon, past the church and down a narrow path that wound between old graves. They stopped at a bench beneath a massive linden tree, its branches bare in the November cold. "Your mother left letters," he said. "She wrote them in the final weeks, when she knew the time was short. There's one for you, and one that she asked me to make sure certain people read." He pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket. "She wrote this for your grandmother." "Grandmother?" Elena's heart lurched. Her father's mother, Oma Helene, was 93 and lived in a care facility in Salzburg. Sharp-minded despite her age, she had always been the family matriarch, the final authority on all disputes and decisions. "Your mother wanted her to know the truth," her father said. "She was afraid to speak up while she was alive, afraid of causing a rift. But she couldn't leave this world letting Matthias's lies stand unchallenged." He handed Elena the envelope. Inside was a letter in her mother's careful handwriting, pages of it, and a smaller note that simply said, "Read this, and then give the letter to Helene. She'll know what to do. I'm sorry I wasn't braver when I had the chance. I love you, Mama." Elena's hands shook as she read the letter meant for Oma Helene. Her mother had documented everything. The way Matthias had borrowed money repeatedly, promising to pay it back and never doing so. The gambling problem he'd hidden for years. The debts that had consumed their parents' savings. The lies he'd told to cover his absences. And most devastating, the way he had systematically constructed a false narrative about Elena to deflect attention from his own failures. "Matthias owes nearly 70,000 euros, the letter revealed. Money we gave him to invest in his business that went to casinos in Bratislava and online poker sites. He swore he would get help, but he never did. And when I became ill, he saw it as an opportunity. If everyone believed Elena was the neglectful daughter, no one would question why he was so often absent. No one would ask where the money had gone. I enabled this by staying silent. I was wrong. Elena deserves to have her name cleared. And Matthias needs to face the consequences of his choices, not hide behind lies about his sister." Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Tears of grief, of vindication, of rage at years stolen by lies. When she finally looked up, her father was watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Shame mixed with determination. "I knew about the money," he admitted. "But I didn't know the extent of it until after your mother died. I found the bank statements she'd hidden, and I didn't know he'd been blaming you for everything. Your mother and I, We always made excuses for him. He was our first child, our son. We thought we were protecting him. By sacrificing me? Yes. Her father's voice broke, and I can never forgive myself for that. The next day, Elena drove to Salzburg. Oma Helene lived in a private care facility that overlooked the Salzach River, a beautiful old building that had once been a merchant's mansion. She was in her room when Elena arrived, sitting by the window in a high-backed chair, a book open in her lap. I wondered when you'd come, Helene said without preamble. Sit down, child. You look terrible. Elena sat and handed her the letter. She watched her grandmother's face as she read, seeing the emotions flicker across those aged features: surprise, anger, sorrow. When Helene finished, she folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Your mother was a gentle soul, Helene said. Too gentle, perhaps. She should have told me this years ago. She was silent for a long moment, gazing out at the river. Matthias was always weak. I saw it when he was young, but I thought he would outgrow it. Instead, he learned to hide it behind charm and lies. What do I do? Elena asked. How do I make people understand? Helene looked at her sharply. You want revenge? I want the truth. They're not always the same thing. Helene reached for Elena's hand. But sometimes they are. And when they are, the truth can be the cruelest revenge of all. What happened next unfolded slowly, like a stone dropped in still water, ripples spreading outward. Helene, despite her age, wielded enormous influence in the family. She had built the family business, a successful printing company, from nothing after the war, had raised 4 children alone after Elena's grandfather died young, and had always been the one who held everyone accountable. She began making phone calls. To Aunt Greta first, reading portions of the letter aloud, her voice cold and factual. Then to other family members, to family friends, to people in the village who had believed Matthias's stories. She didn't editorialize or add drama. She simply presented the facts as Elena's mother had documented them. And she demanded that Matthias come to see her. He tried to refuse. He called Elena, his voice slick with the false concern that had fooled so many people for so long. I know you're hurt that I missed the funeral, he said. But turning Oma against me? That's low, even for you. I didn't turn her against you, Elena said. Mama did, with the truth. There was a long silence. Then, what truth? What lies has that old woman been telling you? Read Mama's letter. Oma has a copy waiting for you. He hung up. But Helene was not someone who could be ignored or avoided. She made it clear. Matthias would come to Salzburg and face the family, or she would disinherit him completely, removing his name from the will that controlled his future stake in the business. It was a threat she had never made before to any grandchild. It was also one she would absolutely carry out. Matthias came. The meeting took place in Helene's room on a cold December afternoon, 3 weeks after the funeral. Elena was there, as was her father, Aunt Greta, and 2 of Helene's other children, Elena's uncles. Matthias arrived wearing an expensive coat and the confident smile that had always opened doors for him. The smile died when he saw the assembled family members. Helene didn't waste time with pleasantries. She handed him the letter. Read it aloud, she commanded. Oma, I don't think... Read it. Elena watched her brother's face as he read their mother's words. She watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his hands begin to tremble. watched the careful construction of lies begin to crumble. When he finished, the room was silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on Helene's mantel. "Well?" Helene said. Matthias tried to rally. Mama was confused at the end. The medication, the pain, she wasn't thinking clearly. These debts she's talking about, they were investments that haven't paid off yet. And as for Elena, don't. Helene's voice cut through his words like a blade. Don't compound your lies with more lies. I've seen the bank statements. I've spoken to your father. I know everything. Matthias turned to their father desperately. "Papa, you know I never meant." But their father was looking at him with an expression of profound disappointment. "You let your sister suffer for years," he said quietly. "You let people believe terrible things about her. You stood at your mother's funeral. No, you didn't even stand there. You weren't there, while everyone whispered about why Elena had driven you away. I had my reasons." 70,000 euros in gambling debts, Helene said. "That's your reason. Shame and cowardice. You hid behind lies about your sister rather than face your own failures." Aunt Greta, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was different than Elena had ever heard it, stripped of its usual severity, just sad. "I owe you an apology, Elena," she said. "I believed him. I said terrible things to you. I'm sorry." Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Matthias tried one more time, his voice taking on the pleading tone that had worked so often before. "I made mistakes, I know that. But I'm still your grandson, your nephew, your son. Family forgives. That's what family does." "Family also tells the truth," Helene said, "and faces consequences." She pulled out a document and set it on the table. "This is an amendment to my will. You are no longer a beneficiary. Your share will be divided among your sister and your cousins. If you wish to contest this, you're welcome to try, but the letter from your mother will become part of the public record. Everyone will know exactly what kind of man you are." Matthias's face went white, then red. "You can't do this." "I already have." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. For a moment, Elena thought he might do something violent. Instead, he looked at her with pure hatred. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? You finally found a way to destroy me." "No," Elena said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you destroy me too." He left without another word. Elena heard his footsteps echoing down the hall, fast and angry, the sound of a man fleeing from consequences he'd evaded for far too long. In the weeks that followed, the story spread through the family and community. Some people apologized to Elena. Others simply avoided her, embarrassed by their own complicity in Matthias's deceptions. A few defended him still, convinced that Elena must have somehow manipulated their mother or Helene. But most people, once they knew the truth, could not unknow it. They remembered all the small inconsistencies in Matthias's stories, the way his accounts never quite aligned, the explanations that had seemed reasonable at the time, but made less sense in retrospect. The careful edifice of lies collapsed, and the man behind it was revealed as smaller and more damaged than anyone had realized. Elena returned to Vienna, to her teaching position and her small apartment in the 9th district. She had achieved what she set out to achieve. The truth had been told, her name had been cleared, and her brother had faced consequences. It should have felt like victory. Instead, she felt mostly tired and sad, and aware that some wounds don't heal just because they're acknowledged. But there were small consolations. Her students welcomed her back with awkward teenage sympathy. Her father called every Sunday now, really talking to her for the first time in years, trying to repair what had been broken. And Oma Helene sent her a letter that arrived on a gray January morning, written in a shaky but determined hand. Your mother loved you fiercely, though she struggled to show it against the tide of your brother's manipulations. She died knowing you would be vindicated, and that gave her peace. Live well, Elena. That's the best revenge. Not tearing others down, but building a life they told you that you couldn't have. You're stronger than Matthias ever was. Strong enough to face truth, even when it hurts. That's worth more than any inheritance. Elena put the letter in a frame and hung it above her desk. And slowly, in the way that healing happens, incrementally with setbacks, never quite complete, she began to build a life that was truly hers, free from the weight of lies she had carried for too long. The revenge she had sought wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was simply this: the truth finally told, and the quiet satisfaction of watching a liar face a world that no longer believed him.